Hi, I'm Dylan Barrett. My sister once called me her protector, her best friend, the one person she could always count on. So when I found a hidden tracking device buried deep in my backpack, I didn't want to believe it was hers. But it was. And when I discovered she'd been using it to monitor my every move for months, feeding information to someone who wanted to destroy everything I'd built, I knew exactly what I had to do. I didn't confront her. I didn't throw it away. Instead, I put that tracker somewhere she'd never expect, somewhere that would expose not just her betrayal, but the entire conspiracy she'd been hiding. What would you do if you discovered your own sibling had been hunting you like prey? Because what I found in that device's data wasn't just tracking coordinates, it was a plan to erase me completely. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. It was supposed to be just another Tuesday morning in Portland. The kind where the rain misted against the windows of my apartment, gentle enough that you didn't need an umbrella but persistent enough to remind you that summer was still months away. I stood in my kitchen, pouring coffee into a travel mug, watching the steam curl upward like tiny ghosts. My backpack sat by the door where I always left it, packed and ready for another day at the tech startup I'd been pouring my life into for the past 3 years. Faith had texted me the night before. "Just checking in, big brother. Hope you're eating something other than ramen and energy drinks." I'd smiled at that, sent back a quick thumbs up emoji, and thought nothing more of it. That was Faith. Always checking in, always concerned, always playing the role of the caring younger sister who worried about her workaholic brother. It was one of the things I loved most about her. Our relationship hadn't always been easy. Growing up in Seattle, we'd been typical siblings, fighting over the remote control, tattling on each other, competing for our parents' attention. But after Mom and Dad died in that car accident 5 years ago, something shifted between us. We became each other's only family. She was 23 then, fresh out of college with a marketing degree and big dreams. I was 28, working as a software engineer at a mid-sized company, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. We'd inherited the house in Seattle, a modest craftsman-style home in the Ballard neighborhood that held every memory of our childhood. Faith wanted to keep it, turn it into an investment property. I wanted to sell it, use the money to start something new. We compromised. I bought her out, gave her enough cash to get her own place, and I used my half to launch Quantum Leap Solutions with 2 of my former colleagues. The company was my dream, a software development firm specializing in data security and encryption services for small businesses. Faith had been supportive, or at least that's what I believed. She came to the launch party, brought champagne, took photos for our website. She introduced me to potential clients at networking events, used her marketing skills to help us build a social media presence. When we landed our first major contract with a chain of boutique hotels across the Pacific Northwest, she was the first person I called. She screamed so loud on the phone I had to hold it away from my ear. But there were moments, small ones, that I'd brushed aside at the time. The way she'd ask too many questions about our client list. The time she'd show up at my apartment unannounced, saying she was in the neighborhood. Could she use my laptop because hers was dead? How she always seemed interested in which conferences I was attending, which investors I was meeting with, what deals we had in the pipeline. I'd chalked it up to genuine interest, sisterly pride in my success. The coffee finished brewing, and I grabbed my backpack, slinging it over one shoulder. It was heavier than usual, but I figured I'd just packed more equipment than normal. I had a big presentation that afternoon with a potential client, a regional hospital network looking to overhaul their patient data security systems. This deal could triple our revenue, put us on the map as serious players in the industry. My phone buzzed. Another text from Faith. "Good luck with the hospital pitch today. You're going to crush it." "I know you will." I stared at that message for a moment. I hadn't told Faith about the hospital pitch. I'd been keeping it quiet, not wanting to jinx it by talking about it too much. I scrolled back through our recent conversations, trying to remember if I'd mentioned it in passing. Nothing. Maybe she'd seen it on my calendar? She had access to my shared family calendar, the one we used to coordinate dinners and holidays. That had to be it. I pushed the thought away, locked my apartment, and headed down to the parking garage. My car, a practical Honda Accord that had seen better days, sat in its usual spot. I tossed my backpack into the passenger seat and started the engine. The presentation materials were on my laptop, backed up on a flash drive, and also stored in the cloud. I was nothing if not thorough when it came to important meetings. The drive to the office took 20 minutes through morning traffic. Our workspace was in a converted warehouse in the Pearl District, all exposed brick and industrial lighting, the kind of place that screamed startup culture. My co-founders, Jeremy and Priya, were already there when I arrived, huddled around Jeremy's desk, looking at something on his screen. "Morning," I called out, dropping my backpack at my desk. "What's got you two so focused?" Priya looked up, her expression troubled. "Dylan, we need to talk about something. It's probably nothing, but Jeremy found something weird in our system logs last night." I walked over, feeling a prickle of unease. "What kind of weird?" Jeremy pulled up a spreadsheet filled with timestamps and IP addresses. "Someone's been accessing our client database from an external source. Not a hack exactly. They had valid credentials, but it's coming from an IP address I don't recognize. It's been happening for about 4 months now. Small queries, nothing that would trigger our security alerts individually. But when you look at the pattern over time, someone's been systematically downloading client information." My stomach dropped. "Do we know whose credentials were used?" "Yours," Priya said quietly. "But before you panic, it could be that someone cloned your login somehow, or maybe you logged in from a different location and forgot about it." I shook my head. "I only access the database from here or from home, and I always use the VPN. This doesn't make sense." We spent the next hour trying to trace the access points, but whoever had done this had been careful. The IP address was masked through several proxy servers, making it nearly impossible to determine the actual location. We decided to change all the passwords, implement two-factor authentication across the board, and monitor the situation closely. But something nagged at me. 4 months. That was right around the time Faith had started asking more detailed questions about the business. Right around the time she'd borrowed my laptop that one weekend, saying she needed to send an important email and her battery had died. No, I couldn't think like that. Faith wouldn't do something like this. She was my sister, my family, the only person in the world I trusted completely. I tried to focus on preparing for the afternoon presentation, but my mind kept drifting back to those system logs, to Faith's too specific text message about the hospital pitch, to the feeling that something was very, very wrong. At noon, I decided to grab lunch from the Thai place down the street. I reached for my backpack to get my wallet, and that's when I felt it. A strange weight in the small front pocket, the one I rarely used. I unzipped it slowly, already knowing somehow that whatever I found would change everything. My fingers closed around something smooth and plastic, about the size of a car key fob. I pulled it out and stared at it, my heart beginning to hammer in my chest. It was a GPS tracker, professional grade, the kind you could buy online for a few $100s. The kind that could monitor someone's location in real time, store historical data, even set up geofencing alerts. And attached to it, with a small piece of tape, was a tiny label in handwriting I'd known my entire life. Faith's handwriting. The Thai restaurant suddenly felt too small, too loud, too bright. I sat in a corner booth, the GPS tracker hidden in my closed fist under the table, my lunch untouched in front of me. Pad Thai, my usual order, now looked like a pile of something unrecognizable. My appetite had vanished the moment I'd seen that handwriting. I turned the device over in my palm, examining it closely. It was a Track Pro 3000, a model I recognized because we'd actually recommended something similar to one of our clients who ran a fleet of delivery vehicles. The battery life on these things was impressive, up to 6 months on a single charge. The real-time tracking was accurate within 10 feet. And the data, all of it, the entire history of everywhere I'd been, would be stored in the cloud, accessible through a simple app. Faith had been watching me. For months, maybe longer. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and searched for the Track Pro app. It was free to download, but you needed an account linked to a specific device to access the data. I stared at the login screen, wondering if I really wanted to go down this path. Once I saw what was on the other side, there would be no going back to the comfortable lie I'd been living. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But I had to know. I created a dummy account, then looked up the device's serial number etched on the back. There was a customer service number listed on the Track Pro website. I called it, putting on my most professional voice, and explained that I'd found the device and wanted to return it to its owner. Could they help me identify the account it was registered to? The customer service representative was apologetic but firm. Privacy policies prevented them from sharing account information. However, if I could provide the serial number, they could send a message to the registered owner letting them know their device had been found. That would be great, I said, reading off the numbers. Please let them know Dylan Barrett found it. I hung up and waited. If Faith was the one monitoring this device, she'd know within minutes that I'd discovered it. The question was, what would she do? My phone rang almost immediately. Faith's name lit up the screen, her profile picture showing her laughing at the beach from a trip we'd taken to Cannon Beach last summer. I let it ring 4 times before answering. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Dylan." Her voice sounded strained, higher pitched than normal. "I just got the weirdest notification. Did you find something of mine?" There it was. Confirmation. My sister, my only family, had been tracking my every movement. "Yeah," I said slowly. "I found a GPS tracker in my backpack. Your handwriting was on it. Want to explain that?" Silence. Long enough that I checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. "Dylan, I can explain," she finally said. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it, Faith? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been spying on me." "I was worried about you," she said quickly. "You've been working so hard, such long hours, and after everything with Mom and Dad, I just wanted to make sure you were safe. You know how you get when you're stressed. You forget to eat, you don't sleep, you push yourself too hard. I just wanted to know that you were okay." It sounded reasonable, almost convincing. The kind of explanation that would have worked on me 6 months ago, before I'd started to notice the small inconsistencies, the too precise knowledge of my schedule, the questions that dug a little too deep. "How long has that tracker been in my backpack?" Another pause. "A few months, maybe 3 or 4. Try 6, I said. "I checked the manufacture date. This device was registered to your account 6 months ago, right around the time someone started accessing my company's client database using my credentials." I heard her breath catch. "Dylan, I don't know anything about that. I would never compromise your business. You have to believe me." "Do I?" The words came out harder than I'd intended. "Because right now, Faith, I'm having trouble believing anything you say. Can we meet?" she asked. "Please, face to face. I need to explain everything, and I can't do it over the phone." I thought about it. Every instinct told me to refuse, to cut this conversation short and figure out my next move alone. But another part of me, the part that still remembered helping her with homework, teaching her to ride a bike, holding her hand at our parents' funeral, that part needed to hear her out. "Fine," I said. "Coffee house on Burnside, 7 tonight." "Thank you," she whispered. "Dylan, I promise, this isn't what it looks like." But it was exactly what it looked like, and by the time I hung up, I'd already decided what I needed to do. I went back to the office, told Jeremy and Priya that I wasn't feeling well, and took my laptop home. Once there, I began a deep dive into everything Faith had been doing for the past 6 months. I started with social media, looking for patterns in her posts, checking her tagged locations against the places I'd been. Then I moved to email, searching through every message she'd sent me, looking for information I'd shared that she shouldn't have known otherwise. But the real breakthrough came when I logged into my home security system. I had cameras set up throughout my apartment, mostly for insurance purposes and peace of mind. The footage was stored in the cloud for 90 days before being automatically deleted. I scrolled back through the recordings, searching for the days Faith had visited. There were more than I remembered. Times she'd stopped by when I wasn't home, letting herself in with the spare key I'd given her for emergencies. I watched as she moved through my apartment with purpose, not like someone checking to make sure everything was okay, but like someone searching for something specific. In one video from 3 months ago, I watched her sit at my desk, open my laptop, and spend 40 minutes doing something on it. She told me that day she'd just stopped by to water my plants while I was at a conference in San Francisco. She'd never mentioned using my computer. I felt sick. This was premeditated, calculated. This wasn't a worried sister being overprotective. This was something else entirely. At 6:30, I left for the coffee house, the GPS tracker still in my pocket. I'd made my decision about what to do with it, but first, I needed to hear what Faith had to say. I needed to look her in the eye and understand why my own sister had betrayed me. The coffee house on Burnside was busy with the dinner crowd, filled with the sound of steaming milk and low conversation. I found a table in the back corner, ordered a black coffee I knew I wouldn't drink, and waited. Faith arrived at 7 on the dot. She looked nervous, her usual confident stride replaced with hesitant steps. She dressed casually, jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked like my little sister, the person I'd protected and cared for my entire life. But looks, I was learning, could be devastatingly deceiving. She sat down across from me, her hands clasped tightly on the table. "Thank you for meeting me. Start talking," I said. "And Faith, I need the truth. All of it. Because I've spent the afternoon going through security footage from my apartment. And I know you've been in there more times than you admitted. I know you used my laptop. So please, don't insult my intelligence with another story about being worried." Her face paled. For a moment, I thought she might get up and leave. Instead, she took a deep breath and met my eyes. "You're right," she said quietly. "I have been tracking you. And I did access your laptop. But Dylan, you have to understand, I didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. Not when someone threatens to destroy everything you've worked for," she said, her voice breaking. "Not when they have information that could ruin you, and they promise to make it all go away if you just give them what they want." I leaned forward. "Who, Faith? Who's been threatening you?" She looked around the coffee house, as if checking to see who might be listening, then leaned in close. "Trevor Kane," she whispered. "He approached me 6 months ago. Said he had evidence of something I did, something stupid and illegal from when I was in college. A cheating scandal, forged transcripts, the kind of thing that would destroy my career in marketing before it even started. He said he'd make it disappear if I helped him get information about your company." Trevor Kane. The name hit me like ice water. He was a competitor, ran a similar firm called SecureNet Solutions. We'd been undercutting each other on bids for months. He'd lost 3 major contracts to us in the past year alone. What kind of information did he want? Faith's eyes filled with tears. "Your client list, your pricing structures, details about upcoming pitches. He wanted to know everything so he could undercut you, steal your deals. Dylan, I'm so sorry. I tried to give him just enough to keep him satisfied, but not enough to really hurt you. I thought I could manage it, keep you safe while protecting myself." I sat back, processing this. My sister had been feeding confidential business information to my biggest competitor, because of blackmail, because of something she'd done years ago that she'd never told me about. "Why didn't you come to me?" I asked. "Why didn't you tell me what was happening? We could have figured it out together." "Because I was ashamed," she said, tears now streaming down her face. "Because you've always seen me as this perfect little sister, and I couldn't stand the thought of you knowing what I'd done. And because Trevor said if I told anyone, he'd release everything. Not just about me, but he'd make up things about you too. He said he'd destroy both of us." I reached across the table and took her hand, even though every part of me wanted to pull away. "Faith, we're going to fix this. But I need you to tell me everything. Every piece of information you gave him, every conversation you had. And I need access to your phone, your computer, everything." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "Okay, I'll give you whatever you need. But Dylan, there's something else you should know." My stomach clenched. "What? The hospital pitch you have today? Trevor knows about it. He's been working on his own proposal for weeks. He's going to undercut your price by 30%. He told me yesterday, said this was going to be the deal that finally puts Quantum Leap out of business." The presentation to the hospital network was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon at their main administrative building downtown. I'd spent most of the morning in a fog, going through the motions of preparing while my mind raced through everything Faith had told me the night before. Trevor Kane wasn't just stealing clients. He was systematically trying to destroy everything I'd built, using my own sister as his weapon. Jeremy and Priya noticed something was off. I'd called an emergency meeting that morning, laid out some of what I'd discovered, carefully avoiding the part about Faith's involvement. I told them we had a leak, that a competitor had inside information, and that we needed to change our strategy for the hospital pitch. They'd looked at me like I'd lost my mind when I suggested we completely revise our proposal 3 hours before the meeting. "Dylan, we've been working on this for weeks," Priya said, her voice strained with frustration. "The pricing is competitive. The service package is comprehensive. If we start changing things now, we'll look unprepared." "Trust me," I said. "We need to do this." In the end, they agreed, more out of faith in our partnership than actual understanding of why I was so insistent. We rebuilt the proposal from the ground up, shifted our pricing structure, added services I knew Trevor wouldn't think to include, and prepared for a presentation that had nothing to do with what we'd originally planned. At 1:30, I drove to the hospital administrative building, a modern glass structure in the Lloyd district. My backpack sat in the passenger seat, and inside it, hidden in that same front pocket, was the GPS tracker. I hadn't removed it. In fact, I'd made sure to charge it fully that morning, because I had a plan. And that plan required Trevor Kane to know exactly where I was. The conference room was on the 6th floor, a long space with windows overlooking the city and a table that could seat 20 people. The hospital's IT director, Margaret Chen, was already there, along with their CFO and head of operations. They greeted me warmly, offered coffee, and we settled in for what they expected to be a standard pitch meeting. What they didn't know was that I'd sent a message earlier that morning, an anonymous tip to the hospital's security team, suggesting they might want to monitor their building's guest log for any unexpected visitors from competing firms. I'd included just enough information to make them curious, not enough to reveal my source. I was 20 minutes into my presentation, walking through our security protocols and implementation timeline, when Margaret's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned, and excused herself quietly. The CFO continued asking questions, but I could see Margaret through the glass walls of the conference room, talking urgently with someone in a security uniform. She returned 5 minutes later, her expression dark. "Gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption, but something unusual has come up. There's apparently another security consultant in the building right now, someone from SecureNet Solutions. They claim they were invited to present, but we have no record of any such meeting." I kept my face neutral, but inside, I was electric with anticipation. "That's concerning. Do you know where they are now?" "Security is escorting them to a meeting room on the 3rd floor to clarify the situation," she said. "This is highly irregular. We take our confidentiality very seriously, and the fact that another firm knew about this meeting, knew the exact time and date, is troubling." "I might be able to shed some light on that," I said carefully. "Over the past few months, my firm has experienced what we believe to be corporate espionage. Someone has been accessing our confidential client information and sharing it with competitors. We've been investigating, and we have reason to believe SecureNet Solutions is involved." The CFO leaned forward. "That's a serious accusation." "It is," I agreed. "Which is why I came prepared with evidence." I pulled out my laptop and opened a folder I'd spent half the night preparing. Inside were screenshots of the unauthorized access to our database, time-stamped and traced back to the IP addresses Faith had provided me. Financial records showing when SecureNet had undercut our bids, always by suspiciously precise margins. And most damning, email exchanges Faith had forwarded me that morning, conversations between her and Trevor Kane where he explicitly discussed using stolen information to sabotage Quantum Leap Solutions. Faith had decided, in the end, to come clean. Completely. She'd given me everything, knowing it might destroy her career, knowing there could be legal consequences. She'd chosen to finally do the right thing. Margaret studied the documents, her expression growing colder with each page. "May I share this with our legal team?" "Please do," I said. "In fact, I think it would be valuable if your security brought the SecureNet representative up here. I'd like to confront them directly about these allegations." What happened next unfolded like a fever dream. Trevor Kane, tall and expensively dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my car payment, was escorted into the conference room by 2 security officers. His confident smile faltered when he saw me, then disappeared completely when he saw the documents spread across the table. "What is this?" he demanded. "I was told there was a scheduling confusion." "There's no confusion, Mr. Kane," Margaret said coldly. "What there is, apparently, is evidence that your firm has been engaging in corporate espionage. Mr. Barrett has presented us with quite a compelling case." Trevor's eyes locked on mine, and I saw the moment he realized what had happened. How I'd used his own surveillance against him, led him straight into a trap baited with the very information he'd been stealing. "This is ridiculous," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Whatever Dylan has told you is fabricated. He's just upset that SecureNet is the superior firm." "Then you won't mind explaining these," I said, pulling up the email exchanges on my laptop. "These are conversations between you and an inside source, discussing confidential information from my company. Information you used to undercut our proposals. Information you're using right now. since you somehow knew about this meeting despite it never being publicly announced." I watched the color drain from his face. He started to speak, stopped, then tried again. "I don't know what you're talking about. If someone from your company contacted me, that's not my fault." "Actually," I said, and this was the part I'd been waiting for, "it is. Because the person you've been blackmailing, the person you forced to spy on me, she's prepared to testify to everything. She's already given a statement to a lawyer. And more than that, she's given me access to every communication between you two, including the ones where you explicitly threatened to fabricate evidence against both of us if she didn't cooperate." The room went silent. Trevor looked like he might be sick. The hospital executives looked at me with something between shock and respect. "I think this meeting is over," Margaret said, standing. "Mr. Kane, our security team will escort you out. You can expect to hear from our legal department. And Mr. Barrett, while I appreciate you bringing this to our attention, I hope you understand that we'll need time to review everything before making any decisions about the contract." "Of course," I said. "Take all the time you need. I just wanted you to know the truth." As security led Trevor out, he shot me a look of pure hatred. I met it calmly, my hand resting on my backpack where the GPS tracker still sat, now forever linked to his presence at an unauthorized meeting, his attempt to steal yet another deal. I gathered my materials and left the building, my hands surprisingly steady. Outside, the Portland drizzle had turned into actual rain. I stood under the overhang, watching people hurry past with umbrellas, and pulled out my phone. Faith answered on the first ring. "How did it go?" "He walked right into it," I said. "The hospital has everything. Trevor's finished." I heard her exhale, a sound caught between relief and sadness. "What happens now? To me, I mean." That was the question I'd been avoiding. Faith had committed crimes, violated confidentiality agreements, betrayed my trust in ways that would take years to repair. But she'd also been blackmailed, manipulated, and in the end, she'd chosen to come forward with everything, knowing the consequences. "Now," I said slowly, "you talk to a lawyer, you cooperate fully with any investigation, and you start rebuilding your life, whatever that looks like. But Faith, I need you to understand something. We're not okay. We might not be okay for a long time. You hurt me. You hurt my business. You lied to me for months." "I know," she whispered. "Dylan, I'm so sorry." "Sorry isn't enough," I said, "but it's a start. And because you're my sister, because you're the only family I have left, I'm going to help you through this. But things are different now. They have to be." She was crying again. I could hear it through the phone. "I understand. Thank you for not giving up on me completely." I hung up and stood in the rain, letting it soak into my jacket. The tracker was still in my backpack, but its purpose was served. Tomorrow, I'd turn it over to the lawyers, along with everything else, all the evidence of Trevor's schemes and Faith's coerced participation. But tonight, I just needed to stand here and feel the rain and know that I'd done something I never thought I'd have to do. I'd turned my sister's betrayal into the weapon that saved everything we both cared about. And in doing so, I'd learned the hardest lesson of all. That family isn't just about blood and shared history. It's about trust. And once that trust is broken, no amount of love can put the pieces back together the same way they were before. The hospital contract decision came 3 days later. Margaret called me personally, her voice professional but warm. Quantum Leap Solutions had won the bid. They'd also filed a formal complaint against SecureNet Solutions with the Better Business Bureau and were considering legal action for attempted fraud. Trevor Kane's reputation in the Portland tech scene was in freefall, but winning one battle didn't mean the war was over. I knew Trevor well enough to know he wouldn't go down quietly. Men like him never did. They fought back with everything they had, consequences be damned. I was right to be cautious. The first sign of trouble came on a Thursday morning, exactly 1 week after the hospital confrontation. I arrived at the office to find Jeremy and Priya already there, huddled around a laptop with expressions that made my stomach drop. "We have a problem," Jeremy said without preamble. "A big one." He turned the screen toward me. It was an article on TechWatch Northwest, a popular industry blog that covered the local startup scene. The headline read, "Quantum Leap Solutions under investigation for data theft and corporate espionage." I felt the blood drain from my face as I scanned the article. It claimed that multiple sources had come forward alleging that Quantum Leap had been systematically stealing proprietary information from competitors, including source code, client lists, and trade secrets. The article specifically mentioned Secure Net Solutions as one of the victims and quoted an anonymous insider who described a culture of cutthroat tactics and ethical violations. "This is insane," I said. "Every single thing in here is a lie. We're the victims, not the perpetrators." "I know that," Priya said. "But the damage is already done. I've gotten 3 calls this morning from existing clients asking for clarification. 2 of them are considering putting our contracts on hold pending an investigation." My phone started buzzing. I looked down to see messages flooding in from contacts across the industry, some asking if the allegations were true, others simply expressing shock and disappointment. My professional reputation, built carefully over years, was being demolished in real time. "This is Trevor," I said. "He's flipping the script, making us look like the criminals." "Can we prove that?" Jeremy asked. "Because if we start throwing around accusations without evidence, we'll look even worse." He was right. I needed to think strategically, not emotionally. I pulled out my phone and called the lawyer Faith and I had retained, a sharp woman named Victoria Rhodes who specialized in corporate litigation and intellectual property disputes. "I saw the article," Victoria said before I could speak. "Don't respond publicly. Don't issue any statements. Don't engage with anyone asking questions. Right now, silence is your best defense." "How is silence a defense?" I demanded. "Our reputation is being destroyed while we sit here doing nothing." "Because anything you say right now can and will be twisted against you," she explained patiently. "Trevor is baiting you. He wants you to lash out, to make accusations you can't immediately prove in court. The moment you do, he'll sue you for defamation and use that lawsuit to keep the story in the news cycle for months." I wanted to argue, but I knew she was right. So what do? We build an airtight case, methodically, carefully, with documentation for everything. Faith's testimony is valuable, but we need more. We need to trace every piece of information Trevor stole, demonstrate the timeline, show the pattern. It's going to take time. Time was something I didn't have, not when clients were already walking away, not when the tech community was buzzing with speculation about Quantum Leap's supposedly unethical practices. After hanging up with Victoria, I made a decision. If Trevor wanted to play dirty, I could play smart. I spent the rest of that day and most of the night going through every file, every email, every document related to our business operations over the past 2 years. I built a timeline of every deal we'd bid on, every client we'd won, and every interaction we'd had with Secure Net Solutions. I cross-referenced it with the information Faith had provided about what she'd given Trevor and when. A pattern emerged. Every time Trevor had undercut us on a bid, it happened within 48 hours of Faith providing him with our pricing information. Every client SecureNet had stolen corresponded with Faith giving Trevor details about our service agreements. The correlation was undeniable, but I needed something more. Something that would prove beyond any doubt that Trevor was the aggressor, not us. I needed him to incriminate himself. That's when I remembered the tracker. I'd kept it, stored it in my desk drawer as evidence. But more importantly, I still had the account credentials to access its data history. The device had recorded everywhere I'd been for 6 months, but it had also recorded everywhere Faith had been when she was carrying my backpack, and more importantly, it had recorded the times when the device had been stationary for extended periods in locations that weren't my apartment or office. I logged into the TrackPro system and pulled up the historical data. There it was, a goldmine of information. The tracker had spent multiple hours at an address in the Hawthorne district, a location that corresponded exactly with Secure Net Solutions' satellite office. The timestamps matched the days when Faith had told me she was meeting with Trevor to hand over information. But there was something else. The tracker had also been at that location on days when Faith wasn't involved, days after I'd discovered it but before the hospital confrontation, days when I'd deliberately carried my backpack to specific locations, knowing Trevor was monitoring my movements. I downloaded all the data, organized it into a comprehensive report, and sent it to Victoria with a detailed explanation. Then I did something that probably violated every piece of legal advice she'd given me. I posted about it on LinkedIn. Not the evidence itself, that would come later through proper legal channels, but a carefully worded statement that laid out the basic facts. That Quantum Leap Solutions had been the victim of corporate espionage. That we had substantial evidence of this espionage, including testimony from a witness who had been coerced into participating. That we would be pursuing all legal remedies available to us. and that the recent allegations against Quantum Leap were a transparent attempt to deflect from the real crimes that had been committed against us. I tagged TechWatch Northwest in the post and CC'd several journalists I knew who covered the local startup scene. Then I sat back and waited for the explosion. It came within an hour. My phone started ringing off the hook. Journalists wanted interviews. Industry colleagues reached out expressing support. And most satisfying, several other small tech firms came forward with their own stories of suspicious behavior from SecureNet solutions, deals that had been stolen in ways that suggested inside information. Trevor had made enemies. I wasn't the only person he'd targeted. I was just the first one willing to fight back publicly. By Friday afternoon, the narrative had shifted. TechWatch Northwest published a follow-up article, this one much more balanced, acknowledging that there were serious questions about what had actually happened and who was really at fault. They interviewed me on the phone, and I was careful to stick to facts, to avoid emotional accusations, to let the evidence speak for itself. Mr. Barrett, you're alleging that SecureNet Solutions engaged in corporate espionage against your firm. That's a serious charge. What proof do you have? We have witness testimony from someone who was coerced into providing confidential information to SecureNet, I said. We have electronic records showing unauthorized access to our systems. We have GPS data demonstrating meetings between this witness and SecureNet personnel. And we have a pattern of SecureNet undercutting our bids with suspiciously accurate pricing within days of our proposals being finalized. Each of these things individually might be circumstantial. Together, they paint a clear picture. And what do you say to people who are skeptical, who think this might be a case of two competitors making accusations against each other? I say that we welcome any investigation, I replied. We have nothing to hide. Our books are open, our practices are ethical, and we stand by our work. If SecureNet can say the same, then I'm sure the truth will come out. The article went live that evening, and the response was overwhelming. The tech community, it turned out, was tired of companies like SecureNet playing fast and loose with ethics. They were tired of the cutthroat mentality that valued winning at any cost over building sustainable, honest businesses. Support poured in. Clients who had pulled back reached out to apologize and reinstate their contracts. New inquiries came from companies who respected the fact that we'd stood up for ourselves rather than quietly accepting defeat. On Saturday morning, I met Faith at a small cafe in southeast Portland, a neutral space where we could talk without the weight of my apartment or her house hanging over us. She looked tired, thinner than I remembered, like the stress of everything was eating away at her from the inside. I saw your LinkedIn post, she said, stirring her coffee absently. It's getting a lot of attention. It needed to be said, I replied. Victoria wasn't thrilled that I went public. But sometimes you have to control your own narrative. Are you going to use my name? In the legal proceedings, I mean. I'd thought a lot about this question. Faith's testimony was crucial, but making her identity public would destroy what was left of her career. She'd already lost 2 freelance clients when word had quietly spread about her involvement in the situation. Only if we have to, I said. Victoria thinks we can keep you as an anonymous witness for now. But Faith, if this goes to trial, there's no guarantee your name won't come out. She nodded, accepting this. I understand. I did this to myself. Whatever happens, I'll deal with it. We sat in silence for a moment, sipping our coffee, 2 siblings who had once been each other's entire world and who were now trying to figure out how to exist in the same space without the foundation of trust that had always held us together. I'm proud of you, Faith said suddenly, for fighting back, for not just rolling over and letting Trevor destroy you. The old Dylan, the one from a year ago, he would have probably just accepted it, tried to rebuild quietly, without making waves. The old Dylan didn't know his own sister was capable of betraying him, I said, not unkindly. That changes a person. She flinched but didn't look away. I know. And I'm sorry. I'll probably spend the rest of my life being sorry. Sorry isn't enough, I said, echoing what I'd told her on the phone. But it's a start. I left the cafe feeling something I hadn't expected to feel. Not forgiveness, exactly. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of acceptance. Faith had made terrible choices, but she'd also found the courage to come clean, to help me fight back, to accept the consequences of her actions. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. I'd exposed Trevor's tactics, rallied support from the community, and taken control of the narrative. For the first time, since finding that tracker in my backpack, I felt like I was winning. I should have known better. Trevor Kane wasn't done fighting, not even close. The lawsuit hit like a freight train on a Monday morning. I was barely through my first cup of coffee when Victoria called, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Trevor's filed against you," she said. "Defamation, tortious interference with business relationships, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. He's asking for $5 million in damages." I nearly dropped my phone. $5 million? For what? For your LinkedIn post, primarily. He's claiming that your public accusations damaged SecureNet's reputation, caused them to lose clients, and subjected him personally to harassment and emotional distress. He's also claiming that your allegations are completely fabricated and that you orchestrated the entire situation to eliminate a competitor. "That's insane," I said. "We have evidence. We have Faith's testimony." "And he's claiming that Faith is a disgruntled former associate of yours who you convinced to lie in order to frame him. He's actually filed a separate motion to have her testimony excluded from any proceedings, arguing that she's not credible due to a personal relationship with you." I felt my carefully constructed sense of control crumbling. Can he do that? He can try. Look, Dylan, this is a slap suit. Strategic lawsuit against public participation. He's not expecting to win. He's trying to bury you in legal fees, tie you up in court for months or years, and make it so expensive to fight back that you'll eventually settle just to make it go away. "I'm not settling," I said immediately. "I'm not giving him a dime." "I was hoping you'd say that," Victoria replied. "But you need to understand what you're in for. Discovery is going to be invasive. They'll demand access to every file, every email, every communication you've had for the past 2 years. They'll depose you, Jeremy, Priya, Faith, and anyone else who might have relevant information. This is going to consume your life for the foreseeable future." She was right. Over the next 3 weeks, the lawsuit became all-consuming. Boxes of documents had to be organized and turned over to Trevor's legal team. I spent hours in depositions, answering the same questions over and over while Trevor's lawyers tried to catch me in inconsistencies or contradictions. But the legal battle was only part of it. Trevor had launched a coordinated campaign to destroy Quantum Leap's reputation beyond repair. He'd hired a PR firm that specialized in crisis management and reputation rehabilitation. They started planting stories with tech blogs and industry publications, always carefully worded to avoid outright lies but designed to cast doubt on everything we said. Articles appeared questioning Faith's credibility, pointing out her relationship to me and suggesting the entire espionage story was fabricated. Opinion pieces wondered whether small startups like Quantum Leap were becoming too aggressive in their pursuit of market share, willing to make false accusations against more established competitors. Forum discussions and social media threads dissected every aspect of the case, with anonymous accounts that I strongly suspected were connected to Trevor posting detailed arguments about why Quantum Leap couldn't be trusted. The effect on our business was devastating. 3 major clients terminated their contracts, citing concerns about our stability and the distraction of the lawsuit. 2 others put renewals on hold indefinitely. New business inquiries dried up almost completely. No one wanted to work with a company that was embroiled in a messy legal fight, regardless of who was actually in the right. Jeremy pulled me aside one afternoon, his expression grave. "Dylan, we need to talk about finances. At our current burn rate, with legal fees and the loss of revenue, we have maybe 4 months before we run out of operating capital. After that, we'll have to start making some very difficult decisions." "What kind of decisions?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Layoffs. We have 8 employees beyond the 3 of us. If things don't turn around, we'll have to let people go. And if things get really bad, we might have to consider shutting down entirely." The weight of it crushed down on me. This wasn't just about my reputation anymore. It was about the people who depended on Quantum Leap for their livelihoods. Good people who had believed in what we were building and who were now paying the price for Trevor's vendetta against me. Priya joined us, and I could see she'd been crying. "I just got off the phone with my contact at the hospital network. They're reconsidering the contract. The legal department is concerned about being associated with a company that's involved in litigation. They want to put everything on hold until the lawsuit is resolved." That was the breaking point. The hospital contract had been our lifeline, the deal that was supposed to triple our revenue and establish us as a serious player in the industry. Without it, we had nothing. I went home that night to my apartment, which suddenly felt too big and too empty. I sat on my couch in the dark, thinking about everything I'd built and how quickly it was all falling apart. 3 years of work, countless late nights, every ounce of passion and energy I had, all of it circling the drain because one vindictive man couldn't accept losing. My phone buzzed. A text from Faith. Saw the news about the hospital contract. I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. She wasn't wrong. If Faith hadn't given Trevor that information in the first place, none of this would be happening. But I also knew that blame wasn't productive right now. What I needed was a solution. I called Victoria, even though it was late, and I knew she was probably with her family. She answered anyway, professional as always. I need to know the truth, I said. What are our actual chances of winning this lawsuit? She was quiet for a moment. Honestly, it's going to be difficult. Not because you don't have a case, but because Trevor has resources we don't. He can afford to drag this out indefinitely. You can't. And juries are unpredictable. Even with all the evidence we have, there's no guarantee they'll see things our way. So what are you saying? That I should give up? I'm saying you need to be realistic about what victory looks like. Victoria replied, sometimes winning isn't about vindication in court. Sometimes it's about surviving long enough to fight another day. After hanging up, I sat in the darkness and thought about what she'd said. Survival. That's what it had come down to. Not justice, not vindication, just the basic question of whether quantum leap solutions would still exist 6 months from now. The lowest point came 2 days later. I arrived at the office to find a notice taped to our door. Our landlord, citing concerns about the negative publicity surrounding our company, was declining to renew our lease when it expired in 60 days. We were being evicted from the space we'd poured so much money and effort into making our own. Jeremy found me sitting at my desk, staring at nothing. This is bad, isn't it? Yeah, I said. This is bad. What are we going to do? I didn't have an answer. For the first time since this entire nightmare had started, I genuinely didn't know if there was a way forward. Trevor had won. He'd used the legal system and the court of public opinion to systematically dismantle everything I'd built. And the worst part was, he'd done it without ever having to prove his innocence or disprove my accusations. He'd simply outlasted me. That evening, I met Faith at her apartment. She lived in a small studio in North Portland. A far cry from the nice place she'd had before all this started. She'd lost most of her clients and was working part-time at a coffee shop to make ends meet. I'm thinking about dropping the lawsuit, I told her. Settling with Trevor, signing an NDA, making it all go away. She looked at me with surprise and something that might have been disappointment. You can't do that. If you give up now, he wins. Everything you've been through, everything I've been through, it'll all be for nothing. What choice do I have? I demanded. We're out of money, out of time, and out of options. I can keep fighting and watch Quantum Leap die, or I can settle and at least salvage something. You have evidence, Faith said. You have my testimony. You have the GPS data, the email records, everything. And he has unlimited resources and a legal team that specializes in burying people like me under paperwork and motions and depositions until we drown. Victoria says he can keep this going for years. I don't have years, Faith. I have months, maybe weeks. She stood up, pacing her small apartment. There has to be something, some way to turn this around. If there is, I can't see it. We sat in silence, two people who'd been through more together in the past 2 months than most siblings experience in a lifetime. And in that silence, watching my sister struggle with the same feeling of helplessness that had consumed me, something shifted. I thought about what Trevor had done, not just to me, but to Faith. The blackmail, the manipulation, the way he'd exploited her past mistakes to turn her into his weapon. And I thought about the other companies that had quietly reached out, sharing their own stories of suspicious behavior from SecureNet. Trevor Kane was a bully, and like all bullies, he relied on his victims being too afraid or too isolated to fight back. But what if they weren't isolated? What if they all fought back together? I pulled out my phone and started making a list. Every company that had contacted me, every person who had expressed support, every journalist who had shown interest in the real story behind the headlines. What are you doing? Faith asked. I'm done playing defense, I said. It's time to go on offense, and I'm going to need your help. She nodded, a spark of hope returning to her eyes. Tell me what you need. Because I just realized something important. Trevor had resources, yes, He had money and lawyers and a PR firm. But I had something he didn't. I had the truth. And I had people who were tired of letting men like him get away with destroying others just because they could. It was time to show him what happened when the victims stopped being victims and started being fighters. The next morning, I started making calls. Not to lawyers or journalists, but to the other victims. There were 5 companies that had reached out to me over the past few weeks, each with their own story of deals that had mysteriously fallen through after interactions with SecureNet Solutions. I scheduled meetings with all of them, starting with CloudBridge Technologies, a small cloud storage startup run by a woman named Sarah Mitchell. We met at a bakery in Northeast Portland, neutral territory where neither of us would feel pressured. Sarah was in her early 40s, sharp-eyed and cautious, the kind of person who had been burned before and learned from it. "I appreciate you reaching out," she said, nursing a cappuccino. "But I'm not sure what you think we can accomplish. SecureNet has deep pockets. Fighting them is like throwing rocks at a tank." "Individually, maybe," I said. "But what if we weren't fighting individually? What if all of Trevor's targets banded together, pooled our evidence, presented a pattern of behavior that's impossible to dismiss as coincidence or sour grapes?" She studied me for a long moment. "You're talking about a coordinated legal strategy. That's expensive and complicated." "I'm talking about survival," I replied. "Trevor's strategy is to isolate us, make us each fight our own battles while he picks us off one by one. But if we work together, share resources, present a unified front, suddenly the power dynamic shifts." Sarah leaned back in her chair. "Tell me more." Over the next 2 weeks, I assembled what I started calling the Coalition. 5 companies, all small to mid-sized tech firms, all with eerily similar stories. Deals that had been stolen with inside knowledge. Bids that had been undercut with impossible precision. Employees who had been approached and pressured to share confidential information. Together, we represented nearly $30 million in lost revenue and contracts. More importantly, together we represented a pattern. Victoria was skeptical at first. Class action lawsuits are complicated, Dylan. Coordinating multiple plaintiffs with different circumstances and different damages is a logistical nightmare. And it doesn't solve your immediate problem, which is that you're running out of money. "What if we aren't looking for money?" I asked. "What if we're looking for something else?" "Like what?" "Like the truth going public in a way Trevor can't spin or bury. Like creating enough noise that regulatory agencies have to pay attention. Like making it so expensive for Trevor to keep fighting that he's the one who runs out of resources, not us." She considered this. "You're talking about a media strategy, not just a legal one." "I'm talking about both. Coordinated, strategic, and relentless." We held our first coalition meeting in a conference room at CloudBridge's office. 6 CEOs and founders, all of us damaged by Trevor Kane's tactics, all of us tired of playing defense. I stood at the head of the table, my laptop connected to a projector, and walked them through what I'd been building. "This is a timeline," I said, pulling up a detailed chart. "Every interaction each of our companies has had with SecureNet Solutions over the past 3 years. Look at the pattern. Trevor doesn't just steal one deal and move on. He systematically targets companies, studies them, identifies vulnerabilities, and then exploits them. He's not competing fairly. He's hunting." The room was silent as they studied the data. I'd spent countless hours building this, cross-referencing dates and events, connecting dots that individually seemed random but together formed a clear picture of predatory business practices. "Now look at this," I continued, pulling up another document. "These are financial records from SecureNet Solutions, publicly available information from their annual reports. Notice anything interesting about their revenue spikes?" Michael Chen from Data Secure Systems, a cybersecurity firm that had lost 3 major contracts to SecureNet, leaned forward. "Those spikes correspond exactly with when they stole deals from us. From all of us." "Exactly," I said. "Trevor's entire business model is built on corporate espionage. Without it, SecureNet is just another mid-tier security consultant. With it, they look like an industry leader who somehow always knows exactly how to beat the competition." "So what do we do with this?" Sarah asked. "We make it public, not through lawsuits that will take years to resolve, but through regulatory complaints. The FTC takes corporate espionage seriously, especially when there's a pattern of behavior across multiple victims. We file a joint complaint, provide all this evidence, and let them investigate. And you think they'll actually do something? This from James Nakamura, who ran a software development firm called Innovate Tech Solutions. I think they'll have to, I replied. One company making accusations? That's he said, she said. 6 companies, all with documented evidence of the same pattern? That's a federal case. Over the following days, we worked together to compile a comprehensive complaint to the Federal Trade Commission. Each company contributed their documentation, their evidence of Trevor's tactics. Faith's testimony became even more valuable because it provided insider knowledge of how the scheme worked, the systematic nature of it, the deliberate targeting of vulnerable companies. But we didn't stop there. I reached out to TechWatch Northwest and 3 other industry publications, offering them exclusive access to the story if they agreed to coordinate their coverage. I wanted every major tech blog and news site in the Pacific Northwest to run the story simultaneously, creating a wave of attention that Trevor couldn't ignore or suppress. The night before we planned to file the FTC complaint and release the story to the press, I met with Faith at a small park near the waterfront. The Portland skyline glowed in the distance, and the Willamette River reflected the city lights like scattered stars. Are you ready for this? I asked her. Once those articles go live, there's no taking it back. Your name is going to be in them. Your involvement, the blackmail, everything. I know, she said quietly. I've been dreading it and preparing for it at the same time. But Dylan, this is the right thing to do. Maybe it'll help other people in my situation. Other people who are being blackmailed or coerced. Maybe they'll see that coming forward is possible. It's going to be hard, I warned. People will judge you. Some will see you as a victim, others as an accomplice. Your career in marketing is probably over, at least in Portland. Then I'll start over somewhere else, she said. Or I'll find a different career. But I can't keep living with this weight. The lies, the guilt, the fear. I need to be free of it, even if freedom comes with consequences. I put my arm around her shoulders, the first real physical affection we'd shared since all of this started. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. You made terrible choices, but you're making better ones now. That counts for something. She leaned against me, and for a moment, we were just siblings again, Dylan and Faith Barrett. 2 people who'd survived losing their parents, and were now surviving something almost as painful, the betrayal and rebuilding of trust between them. The next morning, everything went live simultaneously. The FTC complaint was filed at 9 a.m. At 10 a.m., TechWatch Northwest published their story, a comprehensive investigation into SecureNet Solutions business practices that featured interviews with all 6 companies in the coalition, detailed timelines, and damning evidence of systematic corporate espionage. By 11 a.m., 3 other publications had released their own versions of the story. By noon, it was trending on Twitter. By 2 p.m., the local TV news had picked it up. By 5 p.m., it had gone national, with technology and business reporters from major outlets reaching out for interviews. Trevor's world was burning down in real time, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. I watched it unfold from the Quantum Leap office, my phone buzzing constantly with messages and calls. Victoria called, her voice filled with something I hadn't heard from her before, genuine excitement. Dylan, this is incredible. The FTC has already responded, saying they're opening an investigation. SecureNet's stock price has dropped 15%, and I just got a call from Trevor's lawyer. They want to meet. To discuss what? Settlement. They're willing to drop the lawsuit against you if you agree to cease all public statements about SecureNet. I felt a surge of satisfaction. Tell them no, we're not settling. We're seeing this through to the end. Are you sure? This could be your way out. I'm sure, I said. Trevor wanted to bury me in litigation and bad publicity. Instead, he's the one being buried. I'm not giving him an escape hatch now. That evening, I gathered the coalition members for a video call. We'd all been fielding press inquiries and watching the story spread across the internet. The mood was electric, a mixture of relief and vindication. This is just the beginning, I told them. The FTC investigation will take months. Trevor will fight back. He'll hire more lawyers and PR firms. He'll try to discredit us individually and collectively. But we've done something important today. We've shown that small companies don't have to be victims, that when we work together, we're stronger than any bully. Sarah raised her coffee mug to the camera, to the coalition, and to Dylan Barrett, for having the courage to start this fight. The others echoed her toast, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months, Hope. Real, tangible hope that we were going to win this, that justice was actually possible. But I also knew that Trevor Kane wasn't finished. Wounded animals were always the most dangerous, and I just wounded him badly. Whatever came next would be his last desperate attempt to take me down with him. I needed to be ready for it. The call came exactly 1 week after the coalition's story went public. Victoria's voice on the phone was tense, controlled, the way it got when she was preparing me for bad news. "Trevor has filed an emergency motion," she said. "He's claiming that the public disclosure of the FTC complaint has poisoned any chance of a fair trial in your defamation case. He's asking for an immediate hearing to present evidence that you orchestrated a smear campaign against him." "When's the hearing?" "Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Federal Courthouse downtown." I felt my stomach tighten. This was it. Trevor's final play. He was going to try to paint me as the villain one last time, in front of a judge, under oath, where every word would become part of the permanent legal record. "What do we need to do?" "We need to bring everything," Victoria said. "Every piece of evidence we have, every document, every email, every recording. Because Dylan, this isn't just about the defamation case anymore. This hearing is going to determine how everything else plays out. The FTC investigation, the coalition's credibility, your company's survival. This is the moment where we prove our case or lose everything." I spent that night at the office with Jeremy and Priya, organizing boxes of documents and preparing exhibits. Faith came by around midnight with coffee and sandwiches, and she helped us sort through the mountain of evidence we'd accumulated. "I'm testifying tomorrow," she said. It wasn't a question. "Faith, you don't have to. Victoria can submit your written statement." "No," she said firmly. "I need to do this. I need to look Trevor in the eye and tell the truth about what he did. And I need to face the consequences of my own choices. In public, on the record." I wanted to protect her from that, from the scrutiny and judgment that would come with testifying. But I also understood that this was something she needed to do for herself. This was her path to redemption, painful as it might be. The federal courthouse was an imposing building downtown, all marble and authority. We arrived early, meeting Victoria in the lobby. She looked sharp in her courtroom suit, her briefcase heavy with documents. "Remember," she said as we rode the elevator up, "stay calm, answer only the questions asked, don't volunteer information. Trevor's lawyers are going to try to rattle you, to make you seem emotional or vindictive. Don't give them that satisfaction." The courtroom was smaller than I expected, wood-paneled and formal. Judge Patricia Morrison presided, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with a reputation for cutting through legal maneuvering to get to the truth. Trevor sat at the plaintiff's table with 3 lawyers, looking confident and composed in an expensive suit. The hearing began with Trevor's lead attorney, a man named Richard Holloway who specialized in high-stakes litigation. He stood before Judge Morrison and laid out their case with practiced confidence. "Your Honor, what we're seeing here is a coordinated attack on my client's reputation and business interests. Mr. Barrett, facing the consequences of his own unethical behavior, has orchestrated a public relations campaign designed to deflect attention from his own wrongdoing by making sensational accusations against a respected competitor. The timing of the FTC complaint, released simultaneously with coordinated media coverage, demonstrates that this was never about seeking justice through proper legal channels. This was about destroying secure net solutions in the court of public opinion." Judge Morrison listened impassively, then turned to Victoria. "Miss Rhodes, your response?" Victoria stood, and I felt a surge of gratitude for her presence, her competence, her unwavering support through all of this. "Your Honor, Miss Holloway is asking you to ignore a mountain of evidence because the timing of its release was strategically planned. But evidence doesn't become less true because it's presented effectively. What we have here is documented proof of systematic corporate espionage conducted by Secure Net Solutions over multiple years against multiple companies. Mr. Barrett's so-called smear campaign is actually just the truth being told by people who were tired of being victimized." "Then let's see this evidence," Judge Morrison said. "Mr. Holloway, call your first witness." Trevor took the stand, swearing to tell the truth with his hand on the Bible. Watching him sit there, composed and confident, I felt a familiar anger rising in my chest. But I pushed it down, channeled it into focus. Emotion wouldn't win this. Evidence would. Holloway walked Trevor through his version of events, How Quantum Leap had been struggling financially. How they'd become desperate for contracts and started making wild accusations. How Trevor had tried to be reasonable, had offered to settle quietly, but Dylan Barrett was more interested in publicity than resolution. It was a polished performance, carefully crafted to make Trevor seem like the reasonable victim of an ambitious competitor's desperation. If I didn't know the truth, I might have found it convincing. Then it was Victoria's turn for cross-examination. Mr. Kane, you testified that you never engaged in corporate espionage against Quantum Leap Solutions. Is that correct? That's correct. And you've never employed anyone to gather confidential information from competitors? Never. You've never contacted Faith Barrett regarding her brother's business? Trevor hesitated, just for a moment. I may have met her at industry events. I meet a lot of people. Victoria pulled out a document. Your Honor, I'd like to enter into Evidence Exhibit A, a series of text messages between Mr. Kane and Miss Barrett spanning 6 months. She displayed the messages on the courtroom screen. There they were, Trevor's own words, asking Faith for specific information about Quantum Leap's clients, our pricing structures, our upcoming proposals. Messages where he explicitly offered to make her college transcripts issue disappear if she continued to cooperate. The courtroom went silent. Trevor's confident expression flickered. Mr. Kane, do you recognize these messages? I need to consult with my attorney, Trevor said. That's not an answer to my question. Do you recognize these messages as coming from your phone number? Holloway stood up. Your Honor, we need time to authenticate these documents. They've already been authenticated by a digital forensics expert, Victoria said calmly. The report is in your discovery materials. Mr. Kane, I'll ask again. Are these your messages? Trevor's jaw clenched. Yes, but they're being taken out of context. Let's provide some context then, Victoria said. She pulled up another exhibit, the GPS tracking data. This shows the location history of a tracking device that was planted in Mr. Barrett's backpack. Notice these addresses. This is SecureNet Solutions Satellite Office. The device was stationary at this location on 17 different occasions, corresponding with meetings between you and Miss Barrett. Would you like to explain why your office shows up repeatedly in the location data of a device used to track my client? I watched Trevor's facade crumble in real time. His lawyers were whispering urgently to each other. Judge Morrison leaned forward, her expression sharp with interest. Miss Rhodes, are you alleging that Mr. Kane planted this tracking device? No, Your Honor. We're alleging that Mr. Kane coerced Miss Barrett into planting it, then used the data to monitor Mr. Barrett's movements and business activities. We have Miss Barrett here to testify to exactly that. Faith was called to the stand next. I watched her walk to the witness box, her hand trembling slightly as she swore the oath. But when she sat down and looked at the courtroom, there was steel in her eyes. Victoria guided her through the testimony gently but thoroughly. How Trevor had approached her with evidence of her academic fraud. How he'd threatened to destroy her career if she didn't cooperate. How he'd instructed her specifically on what information to gather and when to provide it. And Mr. Kane knew that Mr. Barrett was your brother? Victoria asked. Yes, Faith said. He specifically chose me because of that relationship. He said Dylan would trust me with access to sensitive information, and that made me the perfect source. Did you want to betray your brother? Faith's voice broke slightly. No, I was terrified. Trevor had power over me, and he used it ruthlessly. Every time I gave him information, I hated myself a little more. But I was trapped. Holloway's cross-examination was brutal. He attacked Faith's credibility, pointed out that she'd lied repeatedly, suggested that she was only testifying now to avoid legal consequences herself. But Faith held firm, acknowledging her mistakes while maintaining that everything she'd said about Trevor was true. When the testimony ended, Judge Morrison called for a recess. We gathered in a small conference room, Victoria reviewing her notes while Faith sat quietly, emotionally exhausted from the stand. How did we do? I asked. Better than expected, Victoria said. Faith's testimony was powerful, and the documentary evidence speaks for itself, but ultimately, this is Judge Morrison's call. She could decide this requires a full trial to sort out. We reconvened an hour later. Judge Morrison looked stern as she addressed the courtroom. I've reviewed the evidence presented today, and I have serious concerns about the allegations made by both sides. However, What's clear to me is that there is substantial evidence supporting Mr. Barrett's claims of corporate espionage. The text messages, the GPS data, and Ms. Barrett's testimony create a compelling picture of systematic wrongdoing by SecureNet Solutions. Trevor's face went pale. His lawyers started shuffling papers frantically. Therefore, Judge Morrison continued, I'm granting Mr. Barrett's motion to dismiss the defamation case. Further, I'm referring this matter to the U.S. Attorney's Office for potential criminal investigation into corporate espionage and witness intimidation. Mr. Kane, you and your company are going to face significant scrutiny going forward. The gavel came down, and with it, Trevor's last chance to bury the truth. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded around us. Cameras flashed, microphones were thrust forward, questions came from every direction. Victoria handled most of them, delivering a prepared statement about justice and accountability. But I looked past the reporters, past the spectacle, to where Faith stood at the edge of the crowd. She caught my eye and gave me a small, sad smile. We'd won, but the victory came at a cost we'd both be paying for years. Still, we'd won, and that had to be enough. 3 months after the courthouse victory, I stood outside a coffee shop in the Alberta Arts District, watching the morning crowd shuffle past with their lattes and pastries. The Portland rain had finally given way to spring sunshine, and the city felt lighter somehow, like it was shedding the weight of winter along with me shedding the weight of everything that had happened. The FTC investigation into SecureNet Solutions had expanded beyond what any of us had anticipated. Federal investigators had uncovered evidence of corporate espionage targeting not just our 6 companies, but at least a dozen others across 3 states. Trevor Kane was facing multiple felony charges, and SecureNet itself was being dissolved, its assets liquidated to pay settlements to victims and legal fees. But the real vindication came from something quieter, more personal. Quantum Leap Solutions had survived. The hospital network had reinstated our contract once the judge dismissed Trevor's defamation suit. 3 of the clients who'd left during the legal battle had come back, apologetic and ready to rebuild trust. New inquiries had started coming in again, this time from companies who'd specifically sought us out because they'd read about how we'd stood up to corporate bullying. We'd moved into a new office space in southeast Portland, smaller than the warehouse but somehow more fitting for who we'd become. There was a plaque by the door that Jeremy had installed as a joke, but that we'd all decided to keep. It read, "Receipts, not revenge." I walked into the coffee shop and found the person I was meeting already seated at a corner table. Marcus Keller was 26, nervous energy radiating from him as he scrolled through his phone. He looked up when I approached, recognition lighting his face. "Mr. Barrett? Thanks for meeting with me." "Dylan is fine," I said, sitting down across from him. "Your email said you were dealing with something similar to what happened to us." Marcus nodded, his hands fidgeting with his coffee cup. "I run a small app development company, just me and 3 other people. We've been working on this project for 2 years, a scheduling platform for healthcare providers. Last month, we pitched it to a potential investor. 2 weeks later, a much bigger company announced they're launching almost the exact same product. Same features, same target market, even similar branding. And you think the investor shared your pitch with them?" "I know he did," Marcus said. "One of their developers reached out to me privately, said he felt guilty. Told me their CEO got the entire pitch deck from this investor and fast-tracked development to beat us to market. By the time we launch, we'll look like the copycats." I listened to his story, hearing echoes of my own experience in every detail. The betrayal, the helplessness, the feeling that the system was rigged against people who played by the rules. "What do you want to do about it?" I asked. "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "I can't afford a lawyer like you had. I don't have evidence like you had. And I'm terrified that if I make noise about this, it'll just make everything worse. Maybe I should just walk away, start over with something else." I took a sip of my coffee, thinking about how to respond. 6 months ago, I might have told him to be careful, to weigh the risks, to consider the cost of fighting back. But I wasn't that person anymore. "Here's what I learned," I said. "Companies like the one that stole from you, they rely on people like us being too scared or too broke to fight back. They count on us accepting that this is just how business works, that the powerful get to take what they want from the powerless. And as long as we accept that, nothing changes." "But you had resources," Marcus said. "You had other companies backing you up. You had evidence. You had a whole coalition." "I built that coalition one conversation at a time," I replied. And the evidence? I gathered it, piece by piece, often not even knowing if it would matter. Marcus, you don't need to have everything figured out before you start. You just need to decide that you're not going to be a victim. I pulled out a business card and slid it across the table. This is Victoria Rhodes, the attorney who represented me. Tell her I sent you. She's been working with several small companies on contingency arrangements, using our case as a model. And this, I wrote another name on a napkin, is the Coalition's Shared Resource Fund. We set it aside to help other startups fight back against corporate theft. You won't be alone in this. Marcus stared at the card and napkin like they were lifelines. Why are you helping me? You don't know me. Because someone needed to help me when I was where you are now, I said. And because every time someone like Trevor Kane gets away with this, it makes it easier for the next one. We change that by fighting back, together. We talked for another hour, and I walked Marcus through the strategy that had worked for us. Document everything, find other victims, build a coalition, use media strategically, and most importantly, never fight alone. By the time we left the coffee shop, Marcus looked different. Still nervous, but now there was determination mixed with the fear. That evening, I met Faith for dinner at a small Italian restaurant in Selwood. She'd moved to Seattle 2 months ago, taking a job with a nonprofit that advocated for whistleblower protections and corporate accountability. It was work that meant something to her, even if it paid less than her previous career in marketing. How's the new job? I asked as we waited for our food. Hard, she said honestly, but good. I'm helping people who are going through what I went through, trying to do the right thing but terrified of the consequences. It feels like redemption, in a way. Like I'm turning my mistakes into something useful. That's more than redemption, I said. That's transformation. She smiled, but there was sadness in it. Do you think we'll ever get back to how we were, before all this? I considered the question carefully. No, I don't think we will. But Faith, maybe that's not a bad thing. How we were before included you keeping secrets and me being naive enough not to see the problems right in front of me. What we have now, it's built on honesty. It's harder, but it's real. I miss being your little sister, she said quietly. The one you protected and trusted without question. You're still my sister, I replied, just not little anymore. And trust, that's something we're rebuilding. It takes time. After dinner, we walked along the waterfront, watching the city lights reflect on the Willamette River. Faith stopped at a bench, the same one where we'd sat before everything went public with the coalition. I still have nightmares, she admitted. About Trevor, about the trial, about losing you completely. Some nights I wake up convinced that you're going to call and tell me you can't forgive me, that I've destroyed our relationship forever. I sat down beside her. I'm not going to lie and say everything's fine between us. It's not. But Faith, you made a choice that mattered. When it would have been easier to keep lying, to protect yourself, you chose the truth. That counts for something. Even though I only chose the truth after months of choosing lies, even then, people don't get defined by their worst moment. They get defined by what they do after it. We sat in comfortable silence, watching a barge make its way slowly upriver. Eventually, Faith stood up, pulling something from her purse. It was the GPS tracker, the one that had started everything. I kept this, she said. I don't know why. Maybe as a reminder of what I'm capable of, both the bad and the good. I took it from her, feeling the weight of it in my palm. This small device had unraveled both our lives and ultimately saved them. It represented betrayal and evidence, lies and truth, all wrapped up in cheap plastic and circuitry. Come on, I said, standing up. I walked to the edge of the waterfront and, without ceremony, threw the tracker as far as I could into the river. It hit the water with a small splash and disappeared. Faith looked shocked. That was evidence. We might have needed it for something. We have copies of all the data, I said. Digital forensics reports, court records, everything documented and backed up. What we don't need is the actual device. We don't need to carry it around anymore. She understood then what I was really saying, that we didn't have to keep carrying the physical reminders of our trauma, that we could let some things go while still holding on to the lessons they'd taught us. A month later, Quantum Leap Solutions announced a new initiative. We were partnering with the coalition to offer free security consultations to startups and small businesses, helping them protect their intellectual property and recognize the warning signs of corporate espionage. It wasn't about profit, It was about building the kind of business community we wanted to be part of, one where people looked out for each other instead of viewing every interaction as an opportunity for exploitation. On the first day of the program, I stood in our new conference room, looking at the dozen entrepreneurs who'd signed up for our workshop. They were all at different stages of building their companies, all vulnerable in different ways, all carrying hopes and dreams that could be crushed by people like Trevor Kane if no one taught them how to protect themselves. "Thank you for being here," I said to start the session. "What we're going to talk about today isn't just about security protocols or legal protections. It's about building a different kind of business culture. One where we succeed together, not by tearing each other down." As I walked them through the workshop, sharing everything I'd learned from my experience, I realized something. Trevor Kane had tried to destroy me, and in a way, he'd succeeded. He destroyed the naive version of Dylan Barrett who believed that good work and honest dealing were always enough, who thought family was simple and trust was permanent. But what rose from those ashes was someone stronger. Someone who understood that integrity wasn't just about following rules but about fighting for what was right even when it cost everything. Someone who knew that the only way to change a broken system was to face it head-on, armed with evidence and allies and the refusal to be silenced. That evening, I drove home to my apartment, passing the hospital where our biggest contract was now being implemented successfully. I thought about Marcus Keller, who'd called me earlier to say he'd found 3 other companies the same investor had betrayed. They were building their own coalition. And I thought about Faith, working in Seattle to help other whistleblowers find their courage, turning her worst mistake into her life's purpose. Some people would always see our story as one of betrayal and conflict, but I was starting to see it differently. It was a story about transformation, about how the worst moments of our lives can become the foundation for our strongest selves if we're brave enough to face them honestly. My backpack sat by my door, the same one that had carried that tracker for months. I picked it up, lighter now, holding only my laptop and tomorrow's plans. No hidden devices, no secret betrayals, just the tools I needed to keep building something worth protecting. And for the first time in as long as I could remember, that felt like enough. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.